kick came quick and mean, a blur of a polished shoe that caught Amara just above the hip and sent her stumbling into the glinting side of the SUV. The parking lot outside Palmetto House, a new high-end restaurant tucked between a church and a jazz lounge on Atlanta's southwest side, had thinned after the charity gala. But the last of the guests stayed long enough to hear the sharp thud, the gasp, the scattered shout. Someone dropped a clutch. Someone else pulled out a phone. Darius stood over her, breath hot with whiskey and anger, his tuxedo jacket hanging open like a flag gone slack. "You hear me now," he hissed. "You keep trying me, and you'll learn." The tuxedo hid his soft belly in a temper that could swell and shrink with the audience. Inside the gala, he'd been a perfect grin. Out here, he was a hiss and a blade. The amber streetlight painted a ring around them. In that circle, he felt tall. He always felt tallest in circles he drew himself. Amara did not cry. She let the sting rise and passed the way she was taught to let pain move through, like heat through a pipe. She braced a palm against the car door, straightened slowly, and rolled her shoulder once to check the joint. Her dress, tea green, ankle length, clean lines, shifted with her. She smoothed it flat as if she were back in chapel and lifted her chin. "Are you finished?" she asked, voice low and steady. "Don't get smart," Darius spat. He darted a glance at the three onlookers near the curb, two women in beaded gowns and a man in a navy suit, all of them frozen mid-breath. "This is my wife," he told the air, and then to her, "Get in the car." A distant train horn shivered the night. Jazz from the lounge slipped under the parking lot's hum like a cat. Amara squared her feet shoulder-width apart, heels quiet on the asphalt. She didn't raise her voice. "You kicked me," she said. "You did it in front of witnesses. You did it after I asked you to stop." Darius' lips curled. He took a step, muscle memory reaching for the old script. Threat, bluff, apology, flowers, repeat. He did not know, could not know, that the script had already been cut apart and burned. He did not know that inside the sleek clutch tucked under Amara's arm lay more than lip gloss and a phone. He did not know about the letter with the county seal. He did not know about the names in her contacts that did not call her Mrs. Henderson, but ma'am. He did not know because he never asked and never listened. He especially did not know who, exactly, his wife was. "Get in the car," he said again, teeth tight. "Now!" Amara's eyes tracked past him, past the SUV, to the far entrance where two figures had just stepped into the light, two silhouettes that moved in lockstep. Neither of them hurried, both of them watching. She blinked once. A signal had been received somewhere she could not see. A line tugged. She lifted her free hand in a small open palm gesture that looked like nothing at all. "Last time," she said to Darius. And there at last her voice dropped into the gravel of a range not used at galas. "This is the last time you put your hands, or your feet, on me. What are you going to do?" He grinned, but it was the grin of a boy in a hallway right before the principal steps out of the office. "Call your cousin?" "I don't need to call anyone," Amara said. "They're already here." He half turned then, enough to catch the two silhouettes resolving into uniforms beneath dark coats, badges at the belt, not flashing anything yet, simply letting their presence do the first work. One of the beaded gown women exhaled. The man in navy took a step backward. A valet pushed a cart and then froze, like a deer at the edge of a road. Darius swallowed. "You called the police on me?" It came out, half laugh, half choke. "I didn't call anyone," she said again, and that time Darius heard what he had never heard, the quiet authority that slipped between her words like steel and velvet. "I notified them. Earlier, just in case." He stared at her. "Notified?" Amara slid the clutch open with a soft click. Inside, alongside the sealed envelope and the phone, lay an ID card encased in a hard, clear shell. She did not yank it out the way a braggart might. She did not wave it. She held it where only Darius could see, angled so the streetlight glazed the raised letters, and the small photograph captured her in a different uniform from anything he'd ever imagined. His breath went out of him. "What is that?" "It's my life," she said, and for the first time in months she felt the words sit true in her chest. The two coats came closer. A third figure crossed the lot, A woman with locks pinned high and a careful gaze, a file tucked under her arm. In the jazz lounge behind them, a trumpet climbed and held a note like a lighthouse beam. Amara zipped the clutch shut and lifted her eyes to Darius as a final car door thumped and a low hum near the entrance swelled. Somewhere past the church, a siren rose. "Darius Henderson," Amara said, calm. "Tonight, you learn." He opened his mouth, reached for charm he could not find, and then the siren's echo rolled into the lot like a tide. The coats parted. The woman with the file stopped at the edge of the circle of light. She did not look at Darius. She looked at Amara and gave the smallest nod. "Captain," she said. The word hung there between all of them, and Darius' eyes went wide, and the phones lifted higher, and in that held breath before anything else could happen, the night shifted. The scene did not begin in that parking lot, though. It began long before, in a kitchen washed with morning light and the low hiss of frying plantains, at a block party where voices braided over ribs and coleslaw, and kids raced in circles, in a tiny office where Amara once sat across from a recruiter who saw the posture of someone who had learned to hold her center. It began when she was a girl in Charleston, every Saturday morning sitting with her grandma, Miss Ola, who taught her 3 prayers and 2 stanzas, and reminded her that both were for balance, not for show. It began when her mother, a daisy, braided her hair and said, "Your crown is not a thing people put on you. It's the way you stand." Amara met Darius on a Sunday, ushering at church after the second service, the sanctuary still humming from the drums. He was handsome the way billboards are, clean lines, confident font, easy to read from far away. He had a real estate smile and a story about a mother who worked too hard and a promise he made to himself at 18 to never be poor again. He told the story well. He practiced the telling. It got him rooms and deals and eventually a wing in a community center with his name etched in glass, Henderson Learning Lab. He loved that wing the way other men love dogs or classic cars. He loved what it said about him even more. What he did not love, not in truth, was a woman whose center could not be nudged by a title or a suit. For the first months, his charm covered everything like a coat of gloss. He learned Amara's mother's name. He learned the way her grandma loved sweet tea and late-night radio mysteries. He learned Amara hid a different engine under her quiet. He took her to a poetry reading and listened, rapt. He stood in her kitchen and stirred Yolof under her eye. He laughed with her cousins and promised he'd keep her safe. "Safe from what?" she'd asked, lip quirked. "From anything that thinks it can take you from me," he'd said, and at the time it had sounded like love. He proposed on the footbridge over the park lake. On a day the sun poured down like blessing, the diamond caught every single ray and flung it back at the world. Amara said yes because he was beautiful and funny and kind in front of people and patient in front of children. And because at the time she thought patience and performance were cousins. She did not tell him everything because the Army had taught her to separate the parts of herself that needed protecting from noise. Her unit was a quiet one. Her work was logistical, operational, a language of movement and timing. She did not deploy in a wash of headlines. She slipped out of state for a week to train, then came home and scrubbed a sink, and no one was the wiser. She had an ID card that did not live in her wallet. She had friends who could cross a room and look like no one you'd remember. She was a professional at not being the story. It wasn't secrecy to her, it was safety. There were family reasons too. An uncle with a temper, a cousin who learned how to pick locks for the wrong reasons and later learned lessons the hard way. The women in her line folded their power small and took it out only when useful. The men in her line had a habit of mistaking quiet for permission. The first time Darius's voice cut her, it was a Tuesday over takeout when he said, "I don't like that dress. It's not you, it's too bossy." He said it with a laugh, and she let it pass like a breeze. The second time, it was over her hair. "The braids are fine for home," he said, studying his reflection. "But the gala's next week. Something softer would be nice." He put his hand at her waist like punctuation. The third time, he wrapped fingers around her wrist in a hallway full of guests and squeezed because she had disagreed with him about the center's after-school program hours in front of a donor. That night, he showed up with lilies as big as plates. "I'm sorry," he said, eyes wet, the performance convincing enough to fool a person who didn't know stage lights. You know how much pressure I'm under. Some days I can barely breathe. Then breathe, she told him, laying the flowers into a vase. But not through me. He kissed her forehead. You ground me. He said he wanted a soft home life to balance the grind. Amara heard soft and bent in small ways. Wear the chiffon instead of the structured black. Sit at the table with investors. Smile the smile that matches the suit. There were limits she did not wave like flags because she was not a flag waver. She simply carried them. On a rare Saturday, a convoy of friends from her unit drove up into the city in civilian clothes and barbecued behind her mother's house like cousins who had grown up together. They threw a football. They argued about plantain edges, crisp or caramel. They called her Cap when no one else could hear. Darius shook hands and passed plates and made a joke that played well. Later, when they were alone, he said, "You lead them?" Mind half on a spreadsheet, she'd said, "Sometimes," and left it there. "What, like a manager?" he asked. She'd smiled. "Something like that." He nodded, satisfied with his translation. The first time his body hurt her, truly, it was a nudge, a press of knuckles against clavicle. The second time, it was a shove that sent her bumping into a table. He cried after that one, real shaking sobs that echoed off tile. "You make me crazy," he said. "I love you too much, that's all." He booked a couples session with a therapist whose office looked like a spa lobby. He cried there too. He told a story about a father who left and a mother who bled her fingers dry to afford the prom suit. The therapist asked him to name his triggers. He named money. He named respect. He did not name control because he could not see it from the inside. He told Amara she triggered his fear. It sounded clinical enough to pass for truth. Then the gala came, the Henderson Learning Lab fundraiser, where he would be an MC, where cameras would click as he lifted a giant check. In the days before, he watched Amara like a director watches a star who might improvise too far. "Wear the green," he said, and she wore the green. "Talk to Mr. Lachlan about his daughter's internship," he said, and she spoke to Mr. Lachlan. "After, we'll head home early," he said, which she heard as, "I will drink enough to need you quiet." She drove. He thrived. The speeches landed. The band glided. People patted his back and called him brother and brilliant and a gift to the city. He collected the words like coins dropped into a jar. Near 9, a young teacher approached their table, Miss Reyna, who ran the center's teen program, and said gentle, "Mr. Henderson, a few girls are asking if the lab can stay open past 7. They're walking home in the dark. Could we talk about a trial?" Darius smiled, teeth perfect. "We don't have the staff, sweetheart," he said. "Budget is tight." Amara watched Miss Reyna's mouth click shut, felt the small collapse of a hopeful thing. "What if we rotate volunteers until grant funding clears?" she offered, careful. "I could coordinate." Darius's hand tightened around the stem of his glass. "We'll discuss," he said into his smile, and the discussion happened later. Not at the table, not through words, but in the parking lot when he accused her of undermining him, of making him look like he didn't have answers in front of donors, of not understanding what it cost to build, of not being soft when he needed soft. "You promised we'd leave early," she said, opening the passenger door. "And then you had to step in and talk to Lachlan like you know him," he said. "You think I don't see you playing hero?" There it was, that last word, the one that scratched at the door of the part of her he had never met. Hero? No. She didn't believe in heroes. She believed in training, in teams, and doing the job. She believed in the quiet gears that turned under the skin of a city. She believed in 20 slow breaths before you spoke. She believed in plans made 2 weeks before anyone knew there needed to be a plan. "I think we should go home," she said. "You've had enough." "Don't tell me what I've had." He stepped closer, heat rolling. "Don't correct me in front of people who sign checks." He said something else then, something low and mean that reached for her mother's name, reached for her grandma's, reached, in fact, for every braided woman in her line. He reached, and when she turned away without answer, because silence was the boundary she chose, he lashed out with his foot like a boy who never learned to hold his own sway. The kick found her. The circle of light watched. The jazz held its long note, and a line deep in Amara's chest that had been drawn in charcoal went suddenly ink black. The envelope in her clutch was not a trick. It was a protection order drafted that afternoon with the help of a woman from a legal clinic who had let Amara sit alone and breathe for a full 10 minutes before asking any questions. The names in her phone were not notches. One, Sergeant Ellis, had texted at 6. "We're nearby if needed." Another, Detective Morrow, had said, "I can swing by the lot at 9 to collect statements." She hadn't expected to need any of it tonight. Still, she had learned under the hard, clean rules that say you prepare for tomorrow before it figures out what to call itself. The woman with locks in the file reached them fully now. Detective Morrow didn't glare or scoop outrage the way some people do when they arrive at a scene and need a story they can swallow. She did the quiet work of looking from face to face, calculating wind direction. "Evening," she said to the air first, then to Amara, that small nod and the word that made Darius' name crack in his throat. "Captain." It landed not like a brass band, but like a key sliding into a lock that had always been there. In the second it took to register, Darius flicked his eyes between badge and wife and back again, his face a losing argument. "You," he started and stopped and tried again. "You told me you work at a logistics firm." "I said I do logistics," Amara replied. "Both things are true. You lied to me. I protected myself." The coats behind Morrow, Ellis, and Park, in plain clothes with department jackets folded over an arm in deference to the space, stayed 3 steps back, exactly where they should be. Their presence said, "We are here," without saying, "We are the story." Morrow tipped her head. "Ma'am, are you all right?" There were protocols. There were questions that needed asking in order, even if you suspected the answers. "Do you need medical?" Amara took a breath so deep she could feel the base of her ribs stretch. "I'll be sore, but I'm okay." Her eyes flicked to the witnesses near the curb, to the valet whose fingers were white on the cart handle. They saw. "I bet they did," Morrow said. "We'll need statements. And I'll need to talk to you about that envelope you mentioned." Darius found his voice again, found it right where he'd left it, in the theater aisle. "This is a misunderstanding," he announced, stepping toward the silent cameras. "We had an argument. My wife—" "Stop!" The word fell from Amara like a small stone dropped into a still pool. It rippled out and stilled everything it touched. "Do not call me your wife to fix the story you broke." Darius blinked. "Amara, baby, do not call me baby either." He reached for her arm. Ellis moved a fraction, enough to remind a hand of gravity. Darius' fingers hovered and then curled into his palm. From the jazz lounge, the trumpet's long note finally broke and fell into a run of dark, sweet chords. The valet exhaled and pushed his cart again, as if the world had resumed and he needed to catch back up. Somewhere behind the church, the siren wound down and cut. "You think a badge scares me?" Darius' voice came lower now, pitched for her alone. "You think because you play soldier with your friends, you can embarrass me tonight?" Amara considered the word soldier and set it aside. The title pinned at the corner of her ID had 5 letters and 4 weights. It did not need defending to him. She stepped half a pace forward so their distance was a boundary she controlled. "I don't need to embarrass you," she said. "You built the stage." Morrow looked at Ellis and Park. "Give us a minute," she said, and they blended backward until they were shadows near the entrance again. Morrow turned back to Amara. "We can walk inside. Less eyes." "I prefer here," Amara said. She glanced at Darius, then back to Morrow. "He likes corners." Morrow's mouth bent, an acknowledgement and a promise. The beaded gown woman near the curb lifted her phone a fraction higher, and then, as if remembering the weight of what she held, lowered it and tucked it away. Her friend touched her elbow. The man in navy, Lachlan as it happened, watched with a tight jaw he rarely showed at board meetings. Amara pressed the clutch to her side, the small, hard shape of the ID a steadying thing against her ribs. She breathed in once more and let the part of her that had stayed in rooms with maps and clocks slide up to the front. When she spoke next, she did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She simply informed. "Detective, there's a protection order in this envelope awaiting the judge's signature in the morning," she said. "There are photos taken last month. There are records of 2 calls to a hotline and 1 to your office. There are names of people ready to give statements. I can read you all of it, but I am tired and I would rather go home. Morrow nodded slowly. We can make space for that, she said. You want an escort? I'll ride with my mother, Amara said. She's on her way. Darius' head snapped. You called your mother? I notified her, Amara said, and this time her half-smile wasn't a cover. It was a small joy at her own inside joke. Earlier, just in case. He tried one last time to reach the old script. We can fix this, he said. We're good together. I put your mother's church on my sponsor list. You put your name on a banner, Amara answered. My mother already had a church. Across the lot, a familiar gray sedan turned in under the crepe myrtles. Amara's chest loosened at the sight of Edaizi's careful parking. The way she straightened the wheel before turning off the engine. That small motion felt like a whole life of steadiness arriving. Morrow lifted a hand toward Ellis and Park. Let's start taking names, she said. Then to Darius finally, with the weight of her badge when she wanted it. Sir, I'm going to ask you to stay right here while we sort, for everyone's safety. Darius barked a laugh that didn't sound like him. You can't tell me where to stand. Morrow's gaze didn't move. I can ask, she said, and I can document how you answered. He looked between the three of them. The captain he married without ever meeting, the detective who didn't need to raise her voice, the two shadows by the door who could move 3 steps in one, and he did the math poorly. You don't scare me, he said to Amara, but his voice had a seam in it now. I'm not trying to, she said. I'm trying to end this. His mouth tightened, then relaxed into something else, a calculation. Think about the lab, he said quietly. Think about what this looks like for the kids, the donors. You want to be the reason the lights go out? Amara let the manipulation sit between them like a gum wrapper, flimsy and used. She didn't pick it up. You chose your actions, she said. Whatever goes dark follows that. The gray sedan door opened. Adaiz stepped out in a simple wrap dress, headscarf tied firm, sandals soundless on the asphalt. She took in the scene with one sweep, and then, like every nurse she had ever worked alongside in night ERs, went straight to the person who needed her most. She didn't touch Amara. She stood at her side, radius warm, voice like a Sunday hymn. I'm here. Amara's throat pulled tight for 1 second, then let go. She nodded. Let's go home soon, she murmured. Morrow shifted the file under her arm. I'll walk you to your car after we get initial statements, she said. Tomorrow we'll finalize the order. You can bring counsel if you wish. Darius stared at the two of them, as if the night had pivoted on a hinge he hadn't known was there. For a moment, one small, exposed second, he looked like a boy in a kitchen listening to his mother's keys in the door. Then his jaw locked and he drew in air for another speech. He never got to give it. Tires whispered at the entrance. A black SUV rolled in low and slow, the kind that didn't belong to donors and didn't belong to the church. The front passenger window eased down. The driver lifted 2 fingers in a signal only 3 people in that lot understood. Morrow's brows ticked up. Ellis straightened. Park turned his shoulder, half shielding the entrance. The SUV stopped in the ring of amber light, idling. A voice from inside, measured, official, and very familiar to Amara, spoke a single sentence through the open window, her name followed by a title, followed by a request that made Darius' face drain of all remaining color. Captain Amara Nkiru Adeyemi, the voice said. Ma'am, are you prepared to execute the plan as briefed? The parking lot went silent in a new way, as if everything that had happened tonight was only the fuse, and the real light was about to hit. For a heartbeat, the lot held still. Headlights washed the asphalt. Dragonflies chased the halogen glare. Amara felt the throb where the kick had landed and the steady weight of the clutch against her ribs. She did not look at Darius when she answered. I am, she said. Proceed. The SUV's window eased up. No sirens, no lights, just movement. Quiet, practiced, precise. Ellis and Park flowed to either side of Morrow without touching anyone, the way people do when they have done this many times and want the moment to shrink rather than swell. The beaded gown women stared and did not breathe. Lachlan's jaw worked once like he was swallowing a word he'd never had to use. What plan? Darius demanded. What is this? Who do you think you are? Morrow didn't give him the courtesy of a glance. Mr. Henderson, she said, tone even, we're about to take statements from witnesses. For your sake, I suggest you stand where you are and keep your hands in your pockets. He laughed once, a brittle sound. You can't just show up with some fake army truck and... It's a rental, Ellis said mildly, eyes on the fringe of onlookers. Used by people who prefer to mind their business? Amara stepped half a pace toward the sedan, where Adazi stood, grounded and watchful. Mama, I'm okay, she said softly. We'll be leaving soon. Adazi's gaze slid over the scene, pausing a fraction on Darius, then returning to her daughter's face. We'll go when you say, she answered. Head high. Two volunteers from the legal clinic, plain clothes, tote bags with tabs labeled in joyful colors, appeared from the lounge's shadow, guided by Park. They looked like cousins from a baby shower, not lawyers who spent evenings stitching people's lives back together. One, Tasha, lifted a hand to Amara. We've got copies, Captain, she said. Everything's in order. Darius's eyes flared. Captain, he repeated as if the word itself were an insult. So this is it? You parade your friends out here to embarrass me. Amara's face didn't move. I asked for safety, she said. And structure. Structure, he mocked. You think you can structure my life? You don't run this city. No, she said, but I know how to run a plan. Morrow took a half step closer, not crowding, simply joining. Let's begin from earlier, she said, her voice quiet enough that the words belonged to the circle, not the curb. You told my office you might need help tonight. Your legal advocate prepared filings. You sign now. A judge signs at 9 a.m. We log the incident. We gather statements. You leave with family. Tomorrow morning we serve him. Straight line. Serve him? Darius scoffed, but it trembled. You can't serve me with anything. Tasha clicked open a hard envelope and slid out a sheaf stapled at the corner. Temporary protective order application, she said, handing it to Amara, not to him. Your signature and date on the last page. We attach the photos, hotline call logs, and tonight's incident report. The clerk's on notice to expect it first thing. Darius made a move like he might reach for the paper. He stopped when Ellis's eyebrows lifted. I'm a donor, he muttered. I sit on boards you people call when you need. Tonight, Morrow said gently, you're a person in a parking lot where a lot of other people saw you kick your wife. The word wife did not belong to him anymore. In Morrow's mouth it arrived as a legal fact, not a prop. He flinched like it stung. Amara took the pen from Tasha. Her hand was steady. She dated the page, clean, slow strokes, then signed. The letters of her middle name, a loop she'd learned at 11 and never changed. Adais watched the pen move like she was watching Holy Writ. When Amara capped it, Tasha slid the pages into a bright red file and tucked it back. Good, Tasha said. We'll walk this through in the morning. From the entrance, Park called, Witnesses, please, in a voice made for calming a crowd. People drifted, valet first, then the navy-suited man who had looked like a donor, then one of the beaded gown women, words tumbling, hands fluttering toward hips and shoes, toward the way the kick had sounded. Morrow's recorder hummed. Names were spelled carefully. The night, which had widened to hold too much, began to gather itself into lines and boxes. Darius tried a new angle. He turned toward Lachlan with the practiced smile that had land-banked him half the block. You know me, he said. You know I don't hurt women. Lachlan's face tightened. He looked at Amara, then at Morrow, then at the woman with the beaded gown who had started to shake now that the adrenaline was thinning. He looked back at Darius and said, to his credit, the one honest thing he could say, I know what I saw. Something inside Darius slipped then, a gear that had always clutched before and now ground against itself. He looked young and then old in the span of a breath. He opened his mouth to speak again and closed it when Morrow lifted a finger, polite, almost a teacher's gesture, to pause him. Sir, she said, you're free to stand here and listen, or you can sit on that curb and wait. Either way, you're going to keep your hands to yourself and your voice low. You can't talk to me like... She didn't change tone. I just did. He sat. Amara's body, which had stayed braced since the kick, let go one notch. She had trained her breathing for years. 4 counts in, 2 hold, 6 out. She had taught it to recruits whose hands shook at the sound of thunder. She had used it in rooms with maps and clocks and in kitchens with boiling oil. She used it now, and the sound of it was so small that only Adiz heard. Her mother's shoulders sank half an inch in relief. Plan Indigo, Ellis murmured to Amara when there was a small gap, using the code they'd agreed on earlier. It was a joke when they named it. No one here had ever been on a mission board with color-coded tabs, but the name made them smile and remember they were allowed to make their own language. Your call, Captain. We only brought what you prepped. Amara nodded once. Plan Indigo was not a raid. It was not a gotcha. It was a checklist with 7 boxes, file signed, witness statements started, mother on scene, personal items retrieval scheduled for tomorrow with a uniform present. Board notification queued for the Henderson Learning Lab, private, eyes only, sent by the chair, timed for after the protective order, tone calm and firm. Safety watch at Amara's mother's house for 72 hours. Nothing flashy, just a cruiser rolling by, a neighbor asked to leave a porch light on. The truth told once clearly, without performance. You sure? Alice asked, not because he doubted her, but because consent matters even in plans you wrote yourself. I'm sure, she said. Tasha checked her watch. Board email is set to go at 10:20, she said. The chair approved the language. It's not your voice. It's theirs. Good, Amara said. She had labored over the phrasing with the chair yesterday at a kitchen table, while Adiz sliced mango into perfect fans. It was simple. Due to a personal matter involving Mr. Henderson that has come to our attention, the board is placing him on temporary leave pending review. Day-to-day operational oversight will be handled by the program director and finance committee. Donor commitments and student services will proceed without interruption. We thank you for your continued support of the lab's mission. It did not name her. It did not narrate pain. It did what boards do when they remember the mission is bigger than a single man's reflection. Darius must have sensed something moving he could not see. What are you doing? He asked, the showman peeling through confusion into worry. You can't touch the lab. That's mine. It belongs to the kids, Amara said, and to the community, and to the rules you agreed to when you formed a nonprofit. His laugh snapped. You think you understand bylaws because you can march in a line? I understand them because I read them, she said. Twice. Morrow finished with the first witness and slid the phone into her jacket pocket. Mr. Henderson, she said, this next part is an offer, not an order. It will help everyone if you go home with a friend tonight, not to your shared residence. Don't contact your wife. Don't go by her mother's house. Don't call or text. Tomorrow by noon, you'll get served. Then you can talk to your lawyer the way she'll talk to hers. I'm not leaving my house, he said. You can't make me. No one is making you, Morrow answered. We're documenting you. He looked toward the lounge where his friends had loved him, toward the church where he had benefited from saying amen in the right moments, toward the corner of the lot where status had always come when he whistled. Nothing came this time, only the hum of a street light and the sound of a trumpet warming down. A car door shut in the near distance. A man in a simple black suit and sneakers walked up with the quiet confidence of someone who could host a cookout or a mediation with equal grace. He carried no file. He stopped a respectful distance away and waited for eyes to find him. Evening, he said finally. I'm Pastor James. Darius latched on like a swimmer to a dock. Pastor, he said, relief flooding his face. Tell them who I am. Pastor James looked at Morrow, then at Adiz, then at Amara, then finally at Darius. His voice stayed soft. I know you as a man who can raise money and a man who can make a room feel big, he said. Tonight I also know you as a man who needs to sit down and listen. I'm not the one. I know, Pastor James said, with the devastating patience of a man who had raised teenagers. Sit anyway. Darius sat again because his body had run out of scripts. Ellis's radio chirped something low. Park nodded once toward the entrance and peeled off. The plan kept moving in calm. Invisible lines. A neighbor's porch light went on 3 blocks away because a text had been sent. A clerk's inbox flagged a file for morning. An aunt in Charleston checked her phone and answered, I can be there by afternoon, baby. The world is wide. 1,000 small mercies can move at once if you line them up. Amara's side burned in a slow, honest way now. She shifted her weight and found Adas's eyes. Let's finish, Adais murmured. Then we go. Morrow turned slightly, creating a smaller ring inside the larger one. Just her, Amara, Adais, Tasha, Ellis. There's one last piece, Morrow said. It's your choice. We discussed earlier the possibility of documenting prior incidents for a pattern. That means photos, dates, names if you have them. It's heavier. It helps the judge. We can do it now or tomorrow, or not at all. Amara felt the room with maps version of herself lift her head and speak. Not tonight, she said. Tonight I sleep. Tomorrow I remember. Good, Morrow said, because a plan with rest in it is stronger than one that runs on fumes. Then we escort you to your mother's car and we'll meet you in the morning. The jazz from the lounge shifted to a hymn that didn't have words, just a melody that sounded like a long walk home. Amara turned toward the gray sedan, took one step, then stopped. She looked back at Darius. Listen, she said, and the way the word landed made him raise his head. No more talk tonight. Tomorrow, lawyers and judges. But I need to say this in front of all these people who don't belong to you. What you did in private, you did in public. What I decided in private, I will live in public too. I am done. It wasn't a speech, it was a release. It untied something knotted in the lot. She and Adais began to walk. Tasha and Ellis flanked them at distance, an honor guard that did not call itself one. They reached the sedan. Adais opened the passenger door and laid a folded blanket on the seat like a nurse's trick for bruised hips. Amara smiled at that, small and true. Captain, the voice came again from the SUV's rolled-down window, measured, respectful. Not a command, a question wrapped in a statement. Ma'am, as briefed, the board notice will send in 3 minutes. Are you comfortable with us placing the financial holds tonight or in the morning? Darius's head jerked. What holds? Amara breathed once. She did not gloat. She did not twist the knife. She simply selected the option that protected the mission and the kids in the quiet work. Tonight, she said. Tasha nodded, thumbs moving on her phone. Somewhere in a server rack named after flowers, a timer nudged a script awake. Elsewhere, a bank system flagged 2 corporate cards and set them to pause with a polite message. At the lab, the motion sensor in the hallway clicked as the cleaning crew moved past the mural. Lights stayed on. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. Darius surged to his feet. You can't touch the money, he shouted, forgetting Morrow, forgetting Pastor James, forgetting the 2 shadows by the door who could cross the distance in 3 soft steps. You can't do anything without me. Morrow moved just enough to place herself between his mouth and Amara's back. Sir, you'll want to lower your voice. He lowered it. The words came through his teeth. You think you can cut me out? I built that lab. You collected checks for a thing built by a village, Pastor James said, and the village is big. Darius took one more step toward the sedan, stopped when Ellis shook his head, then did something he hadn't done since the kick landed. He looked at Amara like a person rather than a mirror. For one unguarded moment, the showman fell away, and the boy who had made a promise at 18 was back, scared and angry that a promise to himself had grown a mouth and started talking back. He found a low last-ditch line. If you do this, he said, voice nearly a whisper, I will tell everyone what you really are. I will go on every radio show and say you tricked me, that you hid from me, that you're military and you tried to control me. I will make you the villain. Amara listened to the threat and thought of Miss Ola on a Saturday morning. 3 prayers, 2 stances. She thought of recruits learning to hold their center. She thought of the lab's kids walking home under streetlights that broke more often than they should. She thought of a boy with holes in his shoes who came to the lab for coding and stayed for the after-school stew Miss Raina made on Thursdays. She thought of the way he laughed with noodles in his teeth. Say what you want, she said softly. I will keep telling the truth. The truth does not need a spotlight. It needs daylight. She slid into the seat, winced as the sore spot pressed, and adjusted the blanket. Adais closed the door with the careful push of a woman who had closed 10,000 doors, and all of them with love. Morrow stepped back, motioned to Ellis and Park. We'll follow, she said. The sedan eased out under the crepe myrtles, signal blinking like a small, polite heartbeat. The lot grew large behind them. Darius, shrinking in the circle of light. Pastor James, a steady post. Morrow trading cards with witnesses who had places to be and stories to tell their group chats. Tasha tapping send on a board notice written in the simple language of adults doing their jobs. They turned onto the street. For a few blocks, no one spoke. The city's night shifted around them, corner stores closing, a bus huffing, a teenager practicing a crossover on a cracked court under a flickering light. Finally, Adayz reached for the radio and clicked it off. Silence filled the car like clean water. "You did well," she said. "I'm tired," Amara answered. "You will sleep," Adayz promised. "Then tomorrow you will finish." They reached Adasi's small brick house, the one with the lemon tree in a pot and the paint Adasi touched up herself every spring. The porch light waited like a welcome. A neighbor's shadow moved behind a lace curtain, because word travels faster than cars. Ellis's rental idled a respectful distance away. Inside, the house smelled like nutmeg and bleach. Adayz set her daughter at the kitchen table and pressed a bag of frozen peas to her hip, the way women have been pressing cold things against bruises since ice existed. She poured water. She put a plate of leftover jollof on the stove and did not ask if Amara wanted it. She knew her child's hunger by the way she blinked. "Eat first, then bath," Adayz said, "then bed." Amara ate, muscle memory doing what appetite did not have the energy for. The food was hot and stubborn, and it helped. After, shower steam filled the small bathroom and turned the mirror to a pale square. When she came back to the kitchen, Adayz had laid out an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts. On the table lay a small stack of papers and a glass jar half full of coins. "What's the jar?" Amara asked, smiling. "Your grandma's," Adasi said. "She put coins in it when your granddaddy was acting up. Every coin was a day she kept her joy. When it was full, she bought herself a blue dress." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that doesn't open old wounds. Adayz kissed Amara's forehead, her brave, bruised, brilliant child. "Sleep," she said again. "Long." Amara slept like a person who had put a heavy box down. Morning would come with paperwork and stamps and conversations that did not care for tears. The lab would wake to an email. Donors would call politely. Miss Reyna would open the teen room at 7 because that's what the plan said, and because the kids would be waiting. The porch light would click off with the sun. Pastor James would brew his coffee and pray in the quiet, adding 2 names to his list. But morning did not get to tell every story. Near midnight, after the statements were logged and the crowd gone, Morrow stood in the empty lot and watched Park pull evidence bags into the back of a cruiser. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, expecting a routine note from the clerk. It wasn't the clerk. It was a forwarded email from the finance committee chair with a red subject line and a single sentence that did not belong to any plan they'd made. "Detective, attached, please find the preliminary audit Miss Reyna sent tonight at 9:52 p.m. We have a problem. We need to speak in the morning. It concerns Mr. Henderson and a set of cash withdrawals from the lab's account, $10,000 at a time, on the last Friday of every month." Morrow read it twice. She looked across the street at the jazz lounge, at the church, at the closed restaurant where the glamour had floated 12 hours ago. She felt the familiar click of a story widening. Across town, Darius sat in a friend's spare room on the edge of a mattress, staring at his phone. A string of unsent texts made a ghostly poem. His face was gray under the light of the screen. He opened his banking app, scrolled, stopped, scrolled again. He closed his eyes. At Adayz's house, sleep held Amara like a hand. The frozen peas had thawed and watered the lemon tree. On the kitchen table under the jar of coins, her phone lit with a quiet message from Tasha. "Served at 12:04 p.m. tomorrow. You rest." And somewhere in the thin space where plans drafted at kitchen tables meet the things they cannot predict, a figure in a hooded sweatshirt moved through the lab's dark hallway, paused by the office door with the etched name, and slid a key, one no one knew he had, into the lock. The door opened without a sound. The lemon tree by Adayz's porch shivered in the morning breeze. Birds flitted on the fence, the kind that carried gossip from house to house without words. Inside, Amara woke to the smell of fried plantains and eggs. For a brief second, she thought it was childhood again. Saturdays in Charleston, her grandmother's radio humming an old hymn, her mother humming louder when the static grew rough. But then she sat up and felt a bruise in her side, a sharp reminder that this was no dream. It was today, the day the papers would be stamped, the day everything hidden would be dragged into daylight. Adiz stepped in with a tray. "Eat first. Judges don't wait for hungry bellies," she said. Amara smiled faintly. "Yes, Ma." She ate slowly, each bite anchoring her to the room. At 9 sharp, Ellis knocked once at the door. His shirt was plain, his face unshaven, his eyes alert. "Car's ready. Clerk's office is expecting you." They drove through Atlanta's streets, markets opening, buses grinding, children tugging at uniforms on their way to school. Ordinary life pulsed around them while Amara sat in silence, her hip pressed against the frozen peas tucked in a plastic bag. At the courthouse, the clerk's office was already humming. Paper shuffled, pens clicked. People filed in with small stories of their own: rent disputes, custody hearings, traffic fines. Tasha met them at the front, her tote bag bulging with files. She handed Amara a fresh copy of the protective order, now stamped and official. "Signed by the judge at 8:43, she said. "Effective immediately. You're covered." Amara read the seal and breathed out. "Next step," Tasha continued. "The sheriff's deputy serves Mr. Henderson. He's notified today before noon. That means he cannot call, text, visit, or step within 100 yards of you or your mother's home. If he does, you dial 911. No second chances." Amara nodded. "Understood." Ellis added, "We'll also keep rolling past your street. Low profile." The process moved quickly, almost too quickly. Forms signed, envelopes sealed, signatures captured. Amara had spent years mapping out military supply chains where one broken link stalled everything. Now she marveled at how fast protection could slide into place when the right people were willing to move. But just as she reached for her mother's hand, Tasha's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her face shifted. "Captain," she said carefully, "we have a problem." Amara's body tensed. "What kind?" Tasha turned the phone for her to see. An email thread glowed on the screen. The subject line read, "Preliminary audit findings, urgent." Miss Reyna had sent it the night before, after the gala. It detailed a pattern: $10,000 withdrawn from the lab's account at the end of every month. No invoices, no receipts, no approvals. The totals stretched into 6 figures. "Embezzlement," Ellis muttered. Adiz crossed herself quietly. "Jisoo." Amara steadied herself. The bruise ached, but this was sharper. Darius hadn't just bruised her body. He had siphoned the lifeline of children who depended on the lab. "What do we do?" she asked. Tasha's voice was calm but urgent. "If we act now, we can freeze accounts before more is taken. But it means going public faster than planned. Once this hits the board officially, it leaks. You'll be pulled into it whether you want or not." Amara's mind raced. She had braced herself for a battle about violence, about her safety, about the unraveling of a marriage. She had not prepared for this. Betrayal multiplied by greed, children's futures stolen. Ellis leaned closer. "Captain, this is bigger than just you and him now. He's been draining money meant for those kids. The choice is yours. We push or we wait." Silence wrapped the table. The courthouse clock ticked loud. Outside, someone's shoes clattered across the marble floor. Amara closed her eyes for a moment, summoning her grandmother's Saturday lessons. 3 prayers, 2 stanzas: strength, balance, clarity. She opened them and spoke. "We push." Tasha nodded grimly. "Then brace yourself, because once this hits the board, Darius won't just be fighting to keep his marriage, he'll be fighting to keep his freedom." And in that moment, none of them noticed the man in the far corner of the clerk's office, the one pretending to wait for his number to be called, slipping his phone back into his pocket. His message had already gone out. To Darius. "They know about the money." The message reached Darius before the deputy's knock. He was slouched on the edge of his friend Malcolm's couch. The kind of borrowed couch where the cushions sagged and smelled faintly of fried chicken grease. His suit from the gala was rumpled in the corner. His eyes were bloodshot, and the whiskey on the side table hadn't dulled the knot in his chest. When the vibration came through his phone, he swiped without looking, expecting a sympathetic text. One of his old college buddies, maybe, or a donor too drunk from the gala to know what had gone down. Instead, it was 5 words from a number he didn't recognize. They know about the money. His heart stopped. He read it again. Once. Twice. His mouth went dry. He scrolled up, but there was no thread. No context, no greeting. Just those 5 words. Damn, he whispered, the sound strangled in his throat. He scrambled for the banking app, fingers clumsy on the screen. When the numbers loaded, his stomach twisted. The last withdrawal he had queued, scheduled for the end of the month, was no longer pending. A red notice blinked back at him. Transaction flag for review. They froze it, he said aloud. His voice cracked. Malcolm padded into the living room, yawning, boxers sagging, a beer still in his hand from the night before. Bro, you're still up. What's wrong? They froze it, Darius snapped, hurling the phone onto the coffee table. The lab's account. They're on to me. Malcolm blinked, confused. What do you mean, froze it? Who froze it? Darius raked his fingers through his hair, tugging at the roots. The board. The damn board. Amara. She's behind this. She's trying to take everything. Not just the house, not just the marriage. She's trying to bury me. Malcolm rubbed his eyes. Hold up. Slow down. What are you saying? You mean the little 10 thou you slide every month? Little, Darius hissed. That's my cushion, my safety. Nobody pays attention to petty cash like that. I built that lab, Malcolm. It's my name on the glass. I deserve something back for the years I've put in. Do you know how many donors I've charmed? How many dinners I've sat through pretending to care about their golf trips? That money's mine in spirit, and now she's painting me like a thief? Malcolm stared. You took 6 figures out of a nonprofit meant for kids. You are a thief, D. Darius' eyes snapped up, bloodshot and furious. Watch your mouth. You think I'm gonna sit here and let her destroy me? Nah, I built this life. I pulled myself up from nothing. Nobody gets to strip me down. Not even her. Malcolm lifted his palms. All right, man, chill. I'm just saying, this sounds bad. You gotta think this through. But Darius wasn't listening. His brain spun like a top, colliding thought after thought. If they exposed the withdrawals, it wasn't just about reputation. It was criminal. Jail time. Headlines. Donors vanishing overnight. And Amara, of all people, the quiet woman he thought he owned, was the one dismantling him piece by piece. He jumped up, pacing the room. I have to flip this. I have to get ahead of it. Malcolm frowned. How? It's paper trails, bro. Numbers don't lie. Numbers can be spun, Darius snapped. I'll say it was reimbursements, contractor payments, emergency funding during COVID. I'll find a way. But first, I need to kill her credibility. If the world believes her, I'm finished. If I make her look like a liar, like a schemer, then maybe... He trailed off, chest heaving. Malcolm shook his head slowly. You're playing with fire. Darius grabbed his phone, typing furiously. His mind was already sketching moves, statements to the press, whispers to donors, a crafted tale of betrayal. She lied about who she was. She tricked me. She's military. She's cold. She staged this to take control. Yes, that was the angle. He'd make her the villain. By late morning, Amara was back at Adis's kitchen table, the protective order freshly stamped, her hips still sore. The papers sat stacked in a neat pile beside the jar of coins. Adais brewed tea, humming faintly under her breath, trying to keep the air steady. Ellis leaned against the counter, his jacket off, scrolling through his phone. Deputy just confirmed. Papers served. Henderson's officially under restriction. Amara nodded. Relief was a small, sharp thing. It didn't erase the bruise or the years of erosion, but it was a line drawn. Then Tasha dropped the hammer. The audit's worse than we thought, she said, spreading fresh documents across the table. Miss Reyna dug deeper last night. It's not just withdrawals, it's shell accounts, vendor invoices that don't exist. Money funneled through fake maintenance contracts, 6 months, maybe longer. Adaizi's hand froze over the teapot. He stole from children. Hundreds of thousands, Tasha said quietly. Enough to shut the lab down if it doesn't stop now. But we caught it early. With the freezes, the kids' programs can survive. Amara leaned back, her breath shallow. He wasn't just hurting me, he was hurting them. Ellis studied her face. Captain, this changes the battlefield. It's no longer only personal, it's public. Once this goes to the board, it'll leak. Reporters will sniff it out. I don't care if they know he kicked me, Amara said, her voice tight. But the kids don't deserve to be dragged into scandal. Tasha tapped the papers. Then you need to decide. Do we move now and risk headlines, or hold back and risk him draining whatever's left? Amara closed her eyes, hearing Miss Rayna's voice the night before. The girls walk home in the dark. Could we keep the doors open longer? She saw their faces, shy but hopeful. She saw the boy with holes in his sneakers who stayed late to use the coding lab. She saw the mural on the wall, bright colors, children's handprints forming wings. Her eyes opened, clear. We move now. Protect the lab at all costs. Adizi reached across and squeezed her hand. Then let the truth fly. By afternoon, the boardroom of the Henderson Learning Lab was in chaos. The finance committee chair, a thin woman named Dr. Lowell with silver hair pulled into a bun, read the audit aloud, her voice crisp and furious. Members shifted in their seats, whispering. Some gasped when the numbers tallied. How could this happen? One donor demanded. We trusted him. He was the face, not the backbone, Dr. Lowell replied. The backbone was always the staff. We were blinded by charisma. Murmurs filled the room. Then right on cue, Darius stormed in. He hadn't been invited, but he came anyway, his suit pressed, his smile polished like nothing had ever happened. Cameras from a local reporter trailed him. He tipped them off himself. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, striding to the head of the table. I need to set the record straight. This is a smear campaign. My wife, he caught himself adjusted, Amara, has been plotting against me. She hid her military past from me, manipulated this board, and now she's spreading lies to steal control of the lab I built. Gasps rippled. He slammed a folder onto the table. These withdrawals, reimbursements, cash payments to vendors who couldn't wait 30 days for processing. I fronted the money myself, out of pocket, to keep this place running. And now she twists it into theft. The cameras clicked. The reporter scribbled. Darius spread his arms like a martyr. Ask yourselves, who here has bled for this lab? Who has raised the millions to keep these doors open? Me, not her. She's a soldier, not a servant of this community. She's using you. It was a performance, and for a moment it landed. Faces softened. Whispers spread. Then the back door opened, and Amara stepped in. She wore no uniform, no suit, just a simple navy blouse and slacks, her braids pulled into a crown. Her mother walked beside her, calm and steady. Ellis followed, arms folded. The room stilled. Amara didn't raise her voice. You call it reimbursements. Show us the receipts. Darius froze. She stepped closer. You say you bled for the lab. The kids bled when you stole from them. While you bought yourself new suits, Miss Rayna patched leaking ceilings with her own paycheck. While you drained accounts, children walked home in the dark because you refused to fund late hours. Her voice sharpened. This lab was never yours, it was theirs. You put your name on glass, but you never put your heart in stone. The reporters clicked faster. The board leaned forward. Darius tried to laugh it off. She's lying. She's manipulating you. But his voice cracked, and Dr. Lowell stood, slamming her palm on the table. Enough, she said. The evidence is clear. Mr. Henderson, you are hereby suspended indefinitely from all duties. A full investigation will proceed. Security will escort you out. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Board members whispered furiously. Security moved toward Darius. He stood there, face pale, sweat beading at his temples. He looked around desperately, searching for a friendly face, a lifeline. None came. Finally, his eyes landed on Amara. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won, but you don't know who you're dealing with. Amara met his gaze, unflinching. I know exactly who I married, and now they do too. As security led him out, cameras flashing, Amara felt the weight shift off her chest. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the beginning of truth. She turned back to the board. The children must not suffer for his sins. Keep the lab open. Keep the lights on. I'll do whatever it takes. The reporters surged closer, questions flying. Captain Adeyemi, why did you hide your army role? Do you think your marriage was a sham? Will you press charges? She held up her hand. I will not answer for gossip. I will only answer for truth. And the truth is this: the lab belongs to the community. Nothing else matters. Adai slipped an arm through hers, steadying her. The cameras captured it, a mother and daughter, strong and unbroken. And in that moment, though the world swirled in chaos, Amara felt a seed of peace. That night, Amara sat in Adiz's living room, the news replaying clips of the confrontation. Commentators debated. Some praised her courage. Others raised eyebrows at her hidden identity as an army officer. The story spread like wildfire across Atlanta and beyond. The phone buzzed nonstop, messages of support, threats, reporters begging for interviews. She ignored them all. Ellis arrived just before midnight, dropping a folder on the table. Background checks pulling new threads. Henderson wasn't just stealing. He's tied to a contractor network, shell companies, fake names. It's bigger than the lab, and if he's desperate enough, he won't stop with money. Amara stiffened. What do you mean? Ellis's eyes darkened. I mean, watch your back. Men like him, when cornered, they don't just lash out financially, they get reckless. Adizi's hands trembled as she refilled the teacups. Jisoo, protect us. Amara clenched her jaw. She wasn't afraid for herself. She had training, discipline, a network. But she thought of her mother, of Miss Reyna, of the children. If Darius had already crossed lines with money, what else might he be capable of crossing? Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a reporter. It wasn't Tasha. It wasn't Ellis. It was an unknown number. She opened it, heart pounding. A single message glared back at her. You may have taken my lab, but I still know where you sleep. The room went silent. Amara's hand tightened on the phone. Her mother gasped softly. Ellis's eyes narrowed. The battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. What would you have done in Amara's situation? Would you have exposed your husband publicly, knowing it could bring scandal to the children's lab, or stayed silent to protect them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends so more people can hear powerful tales like this. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The message glowed on Amara's phone like a knife in the dark. You may have taken my lab, but I still know where you sleep. For a long, brittle moment, the only sound in Adasi's house was the faint whistle of the kettle, still cooling on the stove. Adasi's hand gripped the edge of the table. Ellis straightened, every muscle taut, eyes on Amara. Is it him? Adasi whispered, though she already knew. Amara's jaw was tight, but her voice was steady. Yes, he's escalating. Ellis leaned forward, scanning the message. This is a direct threat. He's rattled, and rattled men are dangerous. He's not just lashing out emotionally. This is intimidation, and intimidation can become action. Adasi's lips trembled. He wouldn't come here, would he? Not to this house? Amara placed a hand on her mother's shoulder, grounding her. Not without consequence, she said firmly. He's already under a protective order. If he steps foot near here, he's digging his own grave. But in her chest, beneath the calm, Amara knew Ellis was right. Cornered men don't always think about consequence. They think about control. Ellis pulled out his phone. I'm notifying Morrow. We'll have a cruiser parked out front tonight. 2, if I can swing it. No risks. Adiz exhaled, pressing her hands together in prayer. Lord, keep watch. Amara rose from the table, pacing to the window. Outside, the quiet suburban street lay bathed in pale moonlight. A neighbor's porch light flickered. Somewhere a dog barked twice, then fell silent. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her. Braided crown, navy blouse, eyes dark with fatigue but burning with resolve. She would not let fear dictate her next step. Meanwhile, across town, Darius sat in Malcolm's spare room, pacing like a caged animal. The TV blared news reports of his suspension from the lab, replaying Amara's calm words in the boardroom. Clips of her standing tall beside Adiz were everywhere, on local news, online blogs, even TikTok edits with captions like, "She didn't flinch." He hurled a glass against the wall, shattering it. They're painting her as a hero, he spat. Me, the villain. After everything I've done. After everything I built. Malcolm sat on the bed, watching cautiously. Look, man, maybe you should lay low for a while. Let this cool down. Lawyers, appeals. You can fight this the right way. The right way? Darius sneered. The right way got me thrown out of my own lab. The right way got me painted like a criminal. Malcolm shook his head. You are a criminal, D. You took money that wasn't yours. That's not Amara's doing. That's yours. Darius' eyes narrowed dangerously. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of not ending up in prison with you. Darius' hands trembled. He grabbed his phone, staring at the text he'd sent Amara. Her silence burned worse than her words. She thinks she can just erase me, he muttered. But I know her. I know her rhythms, her habits. She'll go back to her mother's house, hide behind her army friends, pretend she's untouchable. But she's not. Nobody's untouchable. Malcolm rose slowly. D, you need to stop. This isn't you talking. It's fear. Don't go down a road you can't come back from. But Darius wasn't listening. He was already hatching something darker. The next morning, the protective order was formally served. News broke of the financial scandal, splashing Darius's name across headlines. Henderson Learning Lab founder suspended amid embezzlement allegations. Community outraged as audit reveals missing funds. Wife of suspended director identified as Army officer. The community was divided. Some rallied behind Amara, praising her courage. Others, loyal to Darius' charisma, claimed she had staged it all for power. Amara ignored the noise. She focused on the mission, keeping the lab open. She met with Miss Reyna and Dr. Lowell at the center, assuring staff and volunteers that the programs would continue. Children peeked in from the hall, whispering, wide-eyed at the presence of reporters outside. Don't let them scare you, Amara told the staff. This lab belongs to the children. As long as you hold that line, no scandal can break it. Miss Reyna squeezed her hand, eyes shining. We're with you, Captain. Every step. But beneath the solidarity, Amara felt the tension like a coiled spring. Darius was out there, angry and unpredictable. By evening, that tension snapped. Ellis was stationed outside of Dicey's house in an unmarked car when he spotted a black sedan creeping down the block. The windows were tinted. It passed once, circled, then parked under a tree where the streetlight was out. Ellis's gut tightened. He radioed Morrow. Suspicious vehicle near Captain Adeyemi's residence. Stand by for plates. Inside the house, Amara sensed it too. She'd been raised to trust instincts, her grandmother's voice whispering, when the air changes, you pay attention. The air had shifted. She drew the curtain slightly and saw the silhouette of the car. Her hand tightened on her phone. Ellis, she said quietly. Already on it, he replied, eyes on the sedan. Minutes later, blue lights flashed at the end of the block. The sedan pulled off before the cruiser arrived, vanishing into the night. But the message was clear. Darius was circling, watching. The following day, Amara attended a community forum at the lab. Parents demanded answers, voices heated. How could this happen? One father shouted. Our kids trusted you. It wasn't me, Amara said calmly. It was him. And I am here to make sure it never happens again. Another mother stood, tears streaming. My daughter looks up to you. Don't let them shut this place down. Amara's throat tightened. They won't, she promised. Not while I breathe. The crowd murmured, some skeptical, others moved. And then, as the meeting ended, Amara's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time it was a picture. Her mother's house, the porch, the lemon tree in its pot. Taken from the street less than an hour ago. Adais gasped when she saw it. He's taunting us. Amara's stomach nodded. This wasn't just intimidation. This was escalation. Ellis cursed under his breath. Captain, we can't play defense forever. We need to move. Amara's eyes hardened. Then we move. That night, the plan shifted. Ellis and Morrow coordinated with the precinct to increase patrols. Tasha pushed for the embezzlement case to accelerate, ensuring warrants would follow. But Amara, sitting in her mother's living room with the lemon tree outside, knew legal processes were slow. Too slow for a man like Darius. She thought of her grandmother's lessons. Two stances, One for balance, one for battle. It was time for battle. Tomorrow, she said, voice low but firm. I go to him. Adazi's eyes widened. No, my child. You don't chase fire. You let the fire burn itself out. Amara shook her head. This fire is spreading. He's threatening you, Mama. Threatening children. If I wait, someone else gets burned. Tomorrow I end this. Ellis studied her, then nodded slowly. If you're set on it, we'll make sure you're not alone. Amara met his gaze. No, not tomorrow. He needs to see me. Just me. No shadows, no badges. If I walk in with backup, he'll perform again. If it's only me, he'll reveal himself. Adaze reached across the table, gripping her daughter's hand. Promise me you won't let anger blind you. Amara's eyes softened. I promise. This isn't anger. It's duty. She stood tall and steady, the weight of the last days pressing on her shoulders, but not bending her spine. Tomorrow she would face Darius, not as his wife, not as his possession, but as Captain Amara Nkiru Adeyemi, an army officer, a daughter, and a protector of children who would not allow darkness to win. At that very hour, across the city, Darius sat in a dingy motel room, staring at a corkboard he'd tacked together. Pictures of Amara, of the lab, of Adazi's house, strings tied between them in messy lines. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair unkempt. He muttered to himself, pacing, pointing at the photos. She thinks she's stronger. She thinks she's smarter. But she's nothing without me. Nothing. Tomorrow I'll prove it. He scribbled something on a scrap of paper and pinned it to the board. Endgame. If you were Amara, would you confront Darius face to face, or stay hidden behind the law and wait for the system to handle him? Drop your answers in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. The morning air in Atlanta was heavy with humidity, the kind that clung to your skin before the sun even reached its peak. Amara stood in front of the mirror in her mother's house, braiding her crown tighter than usual, her reflection calm but sharp. She wore a simple black blouse and slacks, neither uniform nor gown, just something that said, I am steady. On the table behind her, the protective order papers lay stacked neatly. Her mother, Adazi, lingered nearby, her hands fluttering between folding laundry and boiling yam on the stove, restless energy betraying her fear. Child, Adaz said, voice low, are you sure about this? Confronting him alone? Men like Darius, they don't fight with reason. They fight with desperation. Amara met her mother's eyes in the mirror. That's why I have to do it. If I hide, he grows. If I face him, he shows his hand. Adazi crossed herself. Chisu, keep you. Ellis arrived shortly after, his presence steady as always. He leaned in the doorway, arms folded. You know I don't like this plan, but if you're going, I'll be close. Not in the room, not in his sight, but near. Amara nodded once. Close but invisible. He handed her a small recorder, sleek and discreet. Slide it in your pocket. His words will bury him faster than anything you could say. Amara slipped it into her slacks. Understood. Adaze pressed a wrapped lunch into her hands. No soldier goes to battle on an empty stomach, she said, tears brimming but refusing to fall. Amara smiled faintly, kissed her mother's forehead, and whispered, I'll be back. Darius was waiting. The motel room stank of stale smoke and sweat. He had chosen it because it was off the main road, cash only, a place where no one asked questions. The corkboard still hung on the wall, photos and strings marking Amara, the lab, and Adazi's house. When Amara knocked, his eyes lit up with a manic gleam. He opened the door slowly, leaning against the frame. His suit jacket wrinkled, but his grin polished. Well, well, he drawled. Look who came crawling. Amara stepped inside without flinching. The room was dim, curtains drawn. The corkboard loomed in the corner. She noted it, then shifted her gaze back to him. I didn't crawl, she said evenly. I walked, and I'm here to end this. Darius chuckled, pouring himself a drink from the cheap whiskey bottle on the table. End this? You think you're the one in control? Sweetheart, without me, you're nothing. You're just a soldier hiding behind orders. I'm the one people love. I'm the one they follow. Amara's eyes narrowed. People followed your performance, not your heart. That's why the lab is still standing while you're here, in a room that smells like failure. His grin faltered, just for a second, but he masked it with a swig of whiskey. You think you've won because the board kicked me out? Because the papers say I can't come near you? Paper doesn't mean power. I know where you live. I know your mother. I can reach you anytime I want. Amara let the words hang. Her fingers brushed the recorder in her pocket. Say it louder, she said, so when the judge plays it back, everyone hears. Darius froze, eyes darting. Recorder? His voice sharpened. You came in here wired? She didn't move, didn't flinch. I came here prepared, just like you taught me. Never walk into a room without knowing the exits. His face twisted, rage bubbling. He hurled the whiskey glass at the wall, shattering it inches from her head. You think you're smarter than me? You think the army makes you better? You're mine, Amara. Mine. Her voice stayed calm. You lost the right to call me yours the moment you raised your hand. Now the world will know what you are. He lunged forward, grabbing her arm. His grip was tight, desperate. I'll ruin you, he spat. I'll tell everyone you used me. That you married me for the lab, for the money. That you're cold, heartless, a soldier who doesn't know how to love. Amara didn't pull back. She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. Tell them. And when you do, I'll tell them about the shell companies, the withdrawals, the kids you stole from. I'll show them the receipts you don't have. Your words against mine. Who do you think they'll believe? The thief or the soldier? His hand trembled. He released her, stepping back. His chest heaved as he tried to find his footing, but the confidence was crumbling. You won't always have your army friend, he said, voice breaking. One day, they'll leave, and when they do, I'll be waiting. Amara took a step toward the door. No, Darius. One day you'll be behind bars, and when that day comes, I won't be waiting. I'll be living. She opened the door, sunlight flooding the dingy room. Ellis's car was parked across the street, engine humming. Darius shielded his eyes, rage and fear twisting together. This isn't over, he shouted. Amara looked back once, her face calm as stone. It's over when I say it is, and I just did. She walked out, the recorder in her pocket heavy with his words. That night, the recording played in Detective Morrow's office. The threats, the confession, the rage, it was all there. Clear, unambiguous, enough to secure a warrant. Morrow leaned back in her chair, exhaling. This is gold. He handed you the rope to hang him with. Amara sat across from her, hands folded. Now tie the knot. Morrow's lips curved into the faintest smile. With pleasure. But Darius wasn't done. As the warrant was being prepared, he sat in the motel room, staring at the shattered glass on the floor. His reflection in the shards was fractured, broken. They think they've beaten me, he whispered. They don't know me. He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found one labeled simply TK. He hesitated, then pressed call. A gruff voice answered. Yeah? Darius swallowed hard. I need a favor. Something off the books. The voice chuckled darkly. Off the books costs extra. I don't care about the cost, Darius said, desperation in his tone. I want her scared. I want her silenced. There was a pause, then the voice replied, Consider it done. Darius hung up, his hand trembling. For the first time, the thought of consequences flickered through his mind, but he shoved it down, telling himself it was survival. He didn't realize he had just stepped onto a path that would destroy him completely. Back at Daisy's house, Amara stood by the lemon tree under the porch light, the night air thick and still. She thought of her grandmother's lessons, of balance and battle. She thought of the children at the lab, of her mother's steady hands, of Ellis and Morrow fighting beside her. She whispered into the night, not as a soldier, not as a captain, but as a woman reclaiming her life. It ends with me. And yet, deep inside, she knew the storm was only gathering, because men like Darius didn't surrender. They spiraled, and the spiral had already begun. The night stretched long in Atlanta, the kind of night where even the cicadas seemed to hush, as if the air itself was bracing for something. At Daisy's house, Amara sat at the kitchen table. The protective order papers still spread out like shields. A faint glow from the porch light filtered in through the window, shining on the lemon tree outside. Ellis had stationed himself in the car across the street, his silhouette a quiet guardian. Detective Morrow had promised the warrant would be ready by dawn, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "We'll have him in custody tomorrow, Captain. Rest if you can." But Amara couldn't rest. She traced the rim of her teacup, eyes sharp, mind restless. Her body was tired, but her instincts, those instincts sharpened by years in the army, kept her spine stiff. Across the city, Darius wasn't resting either. In the dim motel room, Darius sat hunched on the bed, the corkboard looming behind him like a witness to madness. The strings connecting Amara, the lab, and Adazi's house had begun to sag, the tape peeling. He didn't care. His phone was pressed to his ear, his knee bouncing violently. The voice of TK buzzed through the line. "You want her rattled, right? A message, not a body?" "Yes," Darius hissed. "She thinks she's untouchable, hiding behind her army badge and her mother's skirts. I want her to know she's not safe. I want her to feel it." TK chuckled, a sound like gravel. "Fear is a product I sell cheap. Consider it done. You'll owe me after." Darius ended the call, his chest heaving. He tried to convince himself he wasn't crossing a line. He wasn't hiring someone to kill her, just to scare her, humble her. A message. That's all. But deep down, he knew this was no longer about survival. It was about obsession. Just after midnight, the first message arrived. Amara's phone buzzed on the nightstand where she had left it while lying on the couch, fully dressed, her eyes closed, but mind awake. She sat up, picked it up, and froze. A video. She pressed play. The screen flickered with grainy footage. The lemon tree on the porch. The front window of Adazi's house. A figure in a hoodie standing in the yard, holding something that glinted under the porch light. Then slowly, deliberately, the figure set a knife into the soil of the lemon tree's pot. The video ended. Adazi, who had been dozing in a chair nearby, stirred at the sharp intake of Amara's breath. "What is it? Child?" Amara turned the phone toward her. Adazi gasped, clutching her chest. "They're escalating," Amara murmured. She dialed Ellis. Within seconds, he was pounding on the door, storming inside, his hand already on the grip of his sidearm. "Show me." Amara handed him the phone. His jaw tightened. "This isn't Darius's style. He doesn't get his own hands dirty. He's pulling strings." "Which means someone else is watching us," Amara said. Adazi trembled. "What do we do?" Amara's voice hardened. "We don't cower. We prepare." The next morning, Detective Morrow arrived, the warrant for Darius signed and ready. She reviewed the video, her expression grave. "This changes things," she said. "He's bringing outside help. That complicates our timeline." Ellis frowned. "You want me to move in on him now?" "Not yet," Morrow replied. "If he's working with someone else, we need both. If we grab him too early, the other ghost slips away." Adazi slammed her palm on the table. "So we sit here and wait for another knife at my porch?" Morrow's eyes softened. "Ma'am, I understand. But if we net them both, we end this once and for all. One cut doesn't stop the rot. You need the root." Amara folded her arms. "Then bait them. Use me." Morrow raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Darius is unraveling. His threats prove it. If he believes I'm exposed, unguarded, he'll push harder. He'll send his man again. If I'm the bait, you catch the trap when it springs." Adazi's voice cracked. "No, I will not watch you walk into danger again." Amara placed a hand on her mother's. "Mama, every war I fought so others wouldn't have to. If it ends with me standing in the open, then so be it. Better me than you." Ellis exhaled slowly. "Captain, you're not wrong, but if we do this, it's with eyes everywhere. Snipers, unmarked cars, the whole net." Morrow nodded reluctantly. "We'll set it up tonight. But you understand? If he takes the bait, there's no going back for him. We'll bury him." Amara's face was steady. "That's the plan." That evening, the trap was set. The location, the Henderson Learning Lab after hours. The staff had been dismissed early, the lights dimmed. Amara stood alone in the main hall, the mural of children's handprints behind her. She wore no uniform, no badge, just herself. A lamp cast a soft glow, making her silhouette clear through the front window. Bait for the man who wanted her shaken. Outside, the net was tight. Ellis sat in an unmarked car down the block, his earpiece crackling. Morrow and two detectives were positioned across the street, rifles trained. Patrol cruisers idled out of sight, engines low. And yet, as the minutes stretched, the silence grew thick. Then, movement. A shadow slipped across the lot, sliding between parked cars. The figure wore a hoodie, hands gloved. They moved with the silence of someone who had done this before. Amara's body stayed still, but her pulse thrummed. Her hand brushed the recorder in her pocket again. The figure reached the front door. A tool gleamed in his hand. He bent, picked the lock, and pushed the door open with a slow creak. He stepped inside. And that's when the lights exploded on. "Police! Hands up!" The room erupted. Detectives surged from the shadows. Ellis burst through the back entrance. Red and blue lights flared through the windows. The figure froze, hands halfway raised. The hood was yanked back. Not Darius. A stranger. Scar running down his cheek. Eyes cold. T.K. Morrow's voice was sharp. "Where's Henderson?" The man sneered. "Not here." Amara's heart dropped, but her face didn't move. Because even as T.K. was cuffed and dragged out, her phone buzzed in her pocket again. A message. From Darius. "You caught the dog, but the master's still free." Attached was another video, this one darker, shakier. A DZ's front porch. The door. And a voice, low and mocking. "Nice house. Be a shame if it burned." Back at Adizi's home, officers swarmed the street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. The lemon tree swayed in the wind. Knife still buried in its soil. Amara stood on the porch, the weight of the video in her chest. Ellis paced beside her, furious. "He's taunting you. He knows we can't be in two places at once." Amara clenched her fists. "Then we make sure he can't touch this place. Ever." Adiz stepped out, her voice trembling but resolute. "Child, whatever comes, we face it together. He will not break us." Amara pulled her mother close, eyes burning with fire. "No, Mama, he won't break us. But tomorrow I break him." The city seemed to hold its breath. News vans still circled the lab, and online threads spun theories like webs. Some called Amara brave, others called her a manipulator. The noise was a background storm she had learned to ignore. Her focus was small, sharp. Darius, the lab, Adiz, the children. The rest was static. Detective Morrow moved like a conductor with a tight band. Every piece of evidence they had gathered in the last week was a note in her hand. TK's arrest had been a win, but it felt like cutting off one head of a hydra. The scar-faced man had been a hired hand, not the mastermind. Darius was still free. Worse, he was fueled by humiliation and a kind of reckless pride that made him dangerous. "We either pin him down publicly or he keeps moving in the dark," Morrow said, in the concrete hush of the lab's empty conference room. Light from the mural threw faint colors across the table. "We need a sting that leaves him no place to run." Amara sat with her hands folded in her lap. Adiz was there too, quieter than usual, eyes that had wards for prayer and patience. Ellis sat on the other side, the only one in the room whose shoulders still seemed ready for a sudden run. Tasha had a laptop open, Dr. Lowell had a stack of board minutes, and Miss Reyna hovered near the door like someone ready to speak for the kids if they needed representation. "What do you propose?" Amara asked. Morrow set down a thin manila envelope. "We document every transaction. We tie shell companies to his accounts, to his phone logs, to the vendor lists. We get a wiretap authorized on his lines, electronically trap his known associates, and, this is the important part, we create a controlled lure. Darius needs something to chase. We put out a trail that promises him access, or revenge, and watch which path he takes. When he bites, we've got warrants to take him and everyone working with him." Ellis nodded. "We need him to feel like he still controls a story. He'll reach for that and reach too far." Tasha added, "We'll coordinate with the bank so any suspicious transfers will ping us. We put a hold on his personal accounts if the court agrees. We ask the board to publicly remove him so donors won't try to funnel money through other channels. Dr. Lowell tapped a pen. I'll call the major donors. We keep programming funded. We protect the kids' services first. The lab stays open with emergency grants from the Foundation Network. No one panics the parents into pulling kids out. Amara looked at each face. They were ordinary people turned guardians, each with a clear role. She felt a quiet gratitude toward them. Do it, she said. Make it airtight. The plan unfolded with the precision of a trained movement. Morrow and her team worked the legal authorizations. The bank liaison placed silent watches on accounts. Tasha and Dr. Lowell tightened the lab's finances into an armored shell. Ellis made arrangements for physical security. Amara and Adas agreed to a media statement from the board that would be direct but spare, designed to maintain public trust while not inflaming Darius' desire to perform. But that would only calm the water. To end the matter, they needed a final pressure point. You want him to move, Morrow said later, leaning on the hood of an unmarked car as dusk fell. You want him to think he can snag something that brings him back into the room where donors listen. He's always chased applause. Amara had been thinking of that. Darius loved spectacle. He loved being the pivot point in a room. If he could be baited with the promise of reclaiming his public standing, if he believed a board chair or a donor would let him meet with them personally to discuss a comeback, he would jeopardize himself trying to stage that meeting. Set up a fake donor, Amara suggested, a staged outreach that offers him a chance to be public again. Make it credible. Make it seem like a reconciliation. He'll go for it. Morrow's eyes lingered on her. It's risky, but it's also perfect. He'll come if he smells a door back in. We make the door a snare. They worked through the night. Tasha drafted emails using the chair's style, but with a subtle hint of vulnerability. Phrases Darius loved to fold into his speeches, like we can heal together and for the children's sake. A private account was created through a vetted intermediary so the exchange would feel real. Ellis rehearsed routes, exit strategies, what to do if Darius tried to flee. Morrow secured a small, neutral event space, an upscale cafe near the lab, with good lighting and discreet corners. They chose a daytime hour to keep things public enough for cameras, but quiet enough for controlled law enforcement presence. The idea was simple. Send Darius the invitation. When he arrived and tried to negotiate his way back into power, they'd be ready. But Darius wasn't a man to be lured by simple kindness. He needed domination. He needed a stage. He needed to show he had been wronged and was now reclaiming his crown. The bait had to seem like a stage, but be a net. TK sat in a county cell and spat words at anyone who came near. He knew he'd been the cheap muscle, not the conductor, and he knew that his arrest had not freed Darius. That thought made him sneer. Darius watched the news and burned. The plan he sketched in his head became increasingly theatrical. He decided he would not take a private meeting alone. He would make the meeting public, force a confrontation, and reclaim the narrative in a way that would humiliate Amara and rally donors back to him. He thought of a comeback speech, of tears, of sobbed apologies that masked cunning. He believed he could bend the room. The board, advised by Dr. Lowell and guarded by the silent legal team, adopted a statement that was short, factual, and firm. Mr. Darius Henderson is suspended pending investigation. The lab's daily operations will continue under interim leadership. The board condemns embezzlement and promises transparency. The chair's signature bore the weight of many hours and a fear that donors might flee. The writing was meant to be a shield, not a sword. The trap was set. An email was sent to Darius, purporting to be from a mid-level philanthropist. Careful in tone, offering a private meeting to discuss a possible role in restoring the lab's funding. The address had been vetted to look exactly like a real donor's private account, and the language mentioned specific details only a donor would know. A plaque name, a donor dinner, the exact figure of a grant pledge that the lab had once sought. The words were bait wrapped in velvet. Darius read the email and felt the familiar buzz of control return. He printed it on expensive paper, folded it like a relic, and rehearsed phrases before a cracked mirror. He composed a speech about redemption and stewardship. He would stand before a small room and peel his story into pieces, then ask for forgiveness and money. He believed the room would take him back. On the morning of the meeting, Amara drove to the cafe with Adaz beside her. The sky was thin blue, a light wind catching the hem of Adaz's wrap. Ellis took a position 2 blocks away. Detective Morrow took a seat strategically at the back with a small team. Cameras were placed but concealed. Their job was to record, not to amplify. Amara wore civilian clothes. She had no uniform visible, no badge. The recorder Morrow had given her sat in her pocket like an extra heartbeat. She felt the slight pressure of it there, and the knowledge that everything he said could be cataloged and used. When Darius arrived, he did so with the full pomp of a man who expected to be welcomed. He had on a new suit, the kind that cost more in its cut than many people paid for a month. His hair was combed. He smiled like a man approaching a stage. He carried a leather folder that contained copious notes and names of donors he intended to enlist. Inside the cafe, the room smelled of coffee and polished wood. A small group waited. It was the perfect illusion, equal parts intimacy and prestige. Darius moved to the table and exhaled with the certainty of ownership. The donor rose to speak with a voice practiced in philanthropy. He nodded toward Darius with the pose of a man who had been moved. "Mr. Henderson, we're here because we believe in what the lab does. We're also here because we believe in second chances." Darius's face softened. His hands opened. He began his speech with the same cadence he had used at every fundraiser that had mattered to him. He spoke of sacrifice, of late nights, of a vision for the lab. He talked about the staff and the children. He did not apologize at first. He began by reminding the room of his contributions, as though reminding them of the sun would make them forget the theft. Amara listened. She felt the old attraction he once had, the charisma, the words, the easy laugh, but it landed like ash now. The recorder in her pocket captured his cadence like a map. When Darius reached the point where he would pivot into an appeal, when he would reach and ask for a new role, a limited seat, a token of trust, Morrow gave a barely perceptible nod. It was the moment the net closed. One of Morrow's detectives asked a question about the disappearing funds in a casual tone. Darius' smile faltered. He tried to steer the conversation, to charm and laugh. But the questions kept coming, now sharper, more direct. He spoke of reimbursements, of handoffs, of cash flow problems. He named a vendor by memory and tried to throw their suspicion toward a consultant who had long since left. Then quietly, Morrow stood. She had the warrant in hand, signed that morning after new evidence had been assembled. "Mr. Henderson," she said, voice steady enough to cut through the cafe's murmur, "we have probable cause to arrest you for embezzlement and related charges. You are under arrest." It was not the dramatic, noisy arrest Darius had imagined. No cameras blared, no donors yelled, but the air in the room changed as if someone had lit a candle and the flame had found its fuel. Darius stood stunned. His eyes darted, frantic. He tried to reach for a lawyer, for mercy, for any performance that might tilt his fate. He opened his mouth and shut it. Then he laughed, a brittle sound, and barked a denial that no one believed. Men came forward. Hands were cuffed. The folder he had brought fell to the floor. Donors whispered. Some reached for their phones. Others sat frozen, watching the end of a story they had helped write. They led Darius out through the cafe's back door, past a small line of patrons who stared, past a barista who watched like a woman who had seen too many things she could not untangle. The scene lacked the high drama he had planned. It had the quiet, inevitable finality of a bolt snapping. Amara watched him go. There was a hollow place in her stomach. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Only a tiredness that belonged to someone who had watched the worst and now had to live with what came after. They took him to the station. Warrants were executed at 2 properties tied to shell companies. Accounts were frozen. Statements were recorded. TK provided what he knew in exchange for a reduced sentence. The web unraveled. Back at the lab, Dr. Lowell gathered the leadership and the staff. "We keep the doors open. We keep the lights on. We show the children that a community can hold itself to a higher standard," she said. The staff nodded. There was a rawness in the room, but also a steadying resolve. Adize hugged her daughter so tightly her ribs creaked. "You did right," she whispered. Amara exhaled and let herself lean into the grip. For a heartbeat, she allowed the closeness to fill her chest. But even within the embrace, she could feel the aftershocks. The donors who had been shaken, the headlines that would not stop for a week, the private lives that would be scraped by curious people online. That night, the city hummed differently. Darius was in a cell arguing with himself about how it had come to this. He told a story where he was always the victim, a theft of pride, an unjust world. Few believed him. The cameras replayed his earlier threats, his braggadocio, his denials, the footage of him storming in the gala parking lot, of the kick that had started it all, the recording Amara had brought to the judge, and the money trail. Everything matched a single narrative now. He had burned the bridges he thought would save him. But even as Darius faced charges and his supporters dwindled, new questions rose. Who else had known? How many parties had converted public good into private gain? The board tightened. The lab replaced its finance head and set up an external review. Donors called and asked for audits. The city council requested updates. The story moved beyond Darius and into a pattern. Systems that failed when people trusted charm over accounting. Amara slept finally, though unrest curled at the edges. She knew there would be hearings and depositions. There would be months of testimony, the kind that pulls memory under a hot light. There would be the quiet, persistent task of rebuilding trust. She had won a dangerous battle, but the war, if you called it that, was of a different kind. Repair. At dawn, a message came from a young volunteer at the lab who ran the after-school coding class. We kept the lights on last night. The kids came anyway. They said they want to help fix things. They sang the mural song in the hall when it got quiet. Amara read it twice and felt something like a pulse return. She walked into the lab that morning with her mother at her side and a small group of volunteers. The mural needed repainting in one strip where a shoe had scuffed it months ago. They started with fresh paint and steady hands. Children gathered, eyes wide, asking questions that were both blunt and hopeful. Will he come back? Will the lab be okay? Amara answered with the simple truth she had learned in the army and in life. We show up. We do what is needed. We do not run from what is ours. In the months that followed, the lab recovered piece by piece. Donors who believed in missions stayed. New policies tightened, audits became regular, and a culture of oversight grew like a new backbone. Darius' trial would be messy and public, a slow-motion unspooling of greed, and his name would be tied to shame. He would argue, hire lawyers, try to craft a redemption arc. But the recordings, the bank logs, the witnesses, each piece of evidence moved like a hammer. Amara kept coming to work, not as a benefactor, not as a martyr, but as someone who had refused to let harm last. She taught a small class about planning and organization for the older kids. Once, a teenage boy with ink on his fingers asked if she would teach him how to make a plan. She smiled and said, "First you listen, then you draw the lines, then you act. And if you must fight, fight so others don't have to." Weeks turned into months. The lab's after-school attendance climbed. The mural regained its brightness. Adiz's lemon tree flourished, its branches bending under new green. The city's gossip slowed. Conversations moved on to other scandals and triumphs. But for those who had watched the slow unspooling, who had felt the edges of fear and the tug of courage, the story remained a lesson about the thinness of appearances and the hard, ordinary work of keeping a place safe. One afternoon, as Amara walked past the mural with a tray of juice boxes for the younger kids, she saw a donated plaque where Darius's name had once shown. The board had removed it and replaced it with an inscription that read, "For the children who built this place with their hands and hearts." She paused, touched the cool metal, and then kept walking. She did not feel triumphant. She felt steady. The world was not fixed. Redistribution of power never is. But she had done what she could. She took the moment of violence and turned it into a lesson for a community that could now guard itself better. That evening, Detective Morrow called with the final update on the remaining shell accounts. "We've got convictions coming," she said. "The evidence is clean. The recordings helped. Your voice was clear in court. You did right." Amara sat at her kitchen table and listened to the soft hum of Adiz's radio in the next room. She had traded public anonymity for accountability, and the trade had been costly. She had lost the man she had once loved and feared, but she had not lost sight of a larger work. The lab would stand. Outside, the lemon tree caught the sun and threw it back in bright, honest light. Amara closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in the sweet, sour scent of the fruit. There were trials ahead. There would be legal wrangling, civil suits, and long hearings. But the children would have their programs, the lab would be rebuilt stronger, and a woman who had been kicked and threatened had stood up and used the full reach of the law and her own strength to protect the things that mattered. She thought quietly of Miss Ola's 3 prayers and 2 stances. She had held her stance, then let go and let the system move. She had acted not from fury but from duty, and in doing so she had taught the children that a person can hold both grace and fire. At night when the city slept, Amara sometimes walked the empty hallway of the lab and listened to the echoes. The place held memory, of laughter, of study, of small betrayals and repair. It also held possibility. She touched the mural, ran paint across a small nick, and felt for the first time in weeks that the future might be steady enough to trust. And when the cameras stopped and the last headlines faded, people still turned to each other and asked, quietly and carefully, what they would do in a moment like that, what price they would pay for truth. The answers varied, messy and human, but the children at the lab, whose faces shone against the mural, learned what mattered most. That bravery does not always roar. Sometimes it shows up with a recorder in a pocket, a mother by the side, and a team that will not let the town's lights go out. The trial was scheduled faster than anyone expected. The courthouse buzzed like a hive as reporters crowded its steps. Camera crews jostled for angles, snapping pictures of donors in tailored suits and neighborhood parents in plain clothes, all summoned as witnesses to the storm that had once been a charity. Inside, the air was colder, stiffer. The flag stood motionless behind the judge's bench. Every cough, every shuffle of shoes echoed like thunder. Amara sat in the front row beside a daze. She wore no uniform, just a simple blazer over a plain blouse. Her braids were pulled into the same crown she had worn since the first night in the parking lot, the night the kick had started everything. Darius entered, flanked by his attorneys. His suit was crisp, his smile forced, his eyes darting like a man trying to memorize the exits. He scanned the crowd until his gaze snagged on Amara. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped, and the fear beneath showed itself. Then he smirked, as if to remind her he still had a voice. The charges were read: embezzlement, fraud, harassment, violation of a protective order. His lawyer stood tall, ready to spin words into nets. But the prosecution had nets of their own. Detective Morrow sat nearby, files stacked high. Ellis leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his presence steady as stone. Miss Reyna, nervous but resolute, whispered to Dr. Lowell, who clutched her notes like scripture. The trial began. The prosecution's case was clean and deliberate. They presented the audit: withdrawals, shell accounts, forged invoices. They showed the path of money siphoned from children's programs into Darius' personal accounts. They called Miss Reyna, who testified about leaking ceilings patched with her paycheck while Darius bought tailored suits. They called donors, who admitted they had trusted his charm and ignored warning signs. Then they played the recording. Darius's voice filled the courtroom. "You think you're smarter than me? You're mine, Amara. Mine." The room shifted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Jurors stiffened. Even the judge's jaw tightened. Darius' lawyer objected, argued it was entrapment, but the judge overruled. The words were his, uncoerced. Amara listened without moving, her pulse steady but her hands curled into fists in her lap. Beside her, Adazi whispered a prayer. The defense tried to claw back control. They painted Darius as a visionary undone by stress, a man who had sacrificed for his community and stumbled under the weight. They accused Amara of betrayal, of hiding her army life, of using her position to orchestrate a coup. "She deceived my client from the start," the lawyer declared. "She presented herself as something she was not. She used her military training to intimidate him, to manipulate the board, to seize control of the lab. This is not justice. It's revenge." Whispers rippled through the crowd. The lawyer leaned in, pressing. "She is no victim. She is a soldier. She planned this entire downfall. The words hung heavy. For a moment, even the jurors seemed to waver. Amara rose. She had not been called yet, but the judge gestured, granting her the floor. She walked to the stand, back straight, eyes forward. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and took her seat. The prosecutor began gently. Captain Adeyemi, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Amara's voice was calm. We met in church. He was charming, kind, generous in front of others. Behind closed doors, he was controlling. He dictated what I wore, who I spoke to. The first time he grabbed me, I excused it. The second time, he apologized with tears. The third time, he kicked me. In public. That was the night I decided I would no longer be silent. She paused, let the words land. I did not come forward as a soldier. I came forward as a woman who refused to be broken. The defense lawyer pounced. And yet you admit you concealed your army rank from your husband? Why hide unless you had something to gain? Amara met his eyes. I did not conceal. I protected. My work required discretion. It did not belong to him, just as my bruises did not belong to the public. But when he crossed the line, I revealed what I needed to protect myself and others. The lawyer sneered. Others? Or just yourself? Her voice sharpened. The children, the lab, the community. He did not just hurt me. He stole from them. Gasps rippled. A juror scribbled furiously. The lawyer faltered, shuffled his notes. When Amara stepped down, Adeyemi reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. You carry truth like a sword, she whispered. The trial stretched for days. Evidence piled high. Witnesses spoke. Darius grew more erratic, sometimes whispering furiously to his lawyers, sometimes smirking at the cameras, sometimes staring at Amara with eyes that begged and threatened at once. Finally, after weeks of testimony, the jury withdrew. Hours ticked by. The city waited. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. Guilty on all counts. The words rang like a bell. Darius slumped, face ashen. His lawyer whispered furiously, but it was over. The judge set sentencing for the following week. Reporters rushed the hall. Donors whispered relief. Staff from the lab hugged each other. Children at home, watching on TV, cheered. Amara stood still, steady as a stone in a storm. She did not smile. She did not cry. She only breathed. That evening, the lab held a vigil. Parents, children, volunteers, and board members gathered under the mural. They lit candles, sang hymns, and painted new handprints on the wall. Fresh colors, bright and hopeful. Amara stood among them, Adeyemi at her side, Miss Reyna leading the children in song. Ellis leaned against the doorway, watching like a sentinel. When the candles flickered low, Dr. Lowell stepped forward. This place will never again be anyone's stage. It will be what it was always meant to be, a haven for children. Tonight we reclaim it. Applause filled the hall. A small boy tugged at Amara's sleeve. Miss Amara, are you a hero? He asked. She knelt, looking into his wide eyes. No, she said softly. I'm just someone who didn't stay silent. You can be that too. The boy grinned, pressed his tiny hand in yellow paint, and stamped it on the wall. The room erupted in cheers. A week later, Darius was sentenced, 20 years in prison, with restitution to the lab. His name was stricken from the plaque, his accounts drained to repay what could be repaid. The man who once stood at Gallus with champagne in hand was led away in chains, his story a cautionary tale. Amara did not attend the sentencing. She was at the lab, reading to a group of children under the mural. Her voice was steady, her crown of braids gleaming in the light. When Adeyemi walked in, carrying sweet bread for the staff, she paused to watch her daughter. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of pride. Your grandmother always said, she whispered to herself, the crown is not on your head, it's in the way you stand. Amara stood tall. The day dawned clear and quiet. After months of storm, arrests, courtrooms, headlines, the city seemed finally to breathe again. The Henderson Learning Lab stood tall on the corner of its block, its windows gleaming, the mural of children's handprints brighter than ever. It had survived. Amara walked through its halls slowly, almost reverently. The laughter of children echoed faintly in the distance, some in the coding lab, others in the art room. The air smelled of chalk and fresh paint, the scent of repair and renewal. Her hand brushed the new plaque by the entrance. It read simply, "For the children, a community's promise." No single name, no figurehead, just the mission itself. Adiz joined her, carrying a tray of snacks for the volunteers. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" she asked. Amara nodded. "It feels, honest. No stage lights, just light." Adizi smiled softly. "The truth has no spotlight, child. It shines by itself." Weeks passed. The lab's programs grew stronger. Donors who had wavered returned, encouraged by the transparency and oversight now in place. Parents signed their children up in record numbers. Volunteers doubled. For once, the narrative wasn't about Darius or scandal. It was about the children, learning, laughing, becoming. The mural became a living piece of history. Every Friday, new handprints were added. Tiny palms in red, green, yellow, blue, marking each child who walked through the lab's doors, a testimony that they belonged here, that this was their space. Amara watched them one Friday evening, her chest tightening with something like joy. The children sang as they pressed their hands to the wall, their voices rising with the same song Miss Reyna had taught them during the vigil. "Captain Amara," one boy shouted, grinning. "Come put your hand too." She laughed, dipping her palm into purple paint. She pressed it against the wall among the others, her handprint no bigger or smaller than the rest. Equal, one of many. The children cheered. Meanwhile, Darius sat in prison. At first he tried to perform there too, telling stories of betrayal, painting himself as a visionary undone by jealousy. But prison wasn't a gala. Inmates didn't care about charm. They cared about truth, and the truth was written all over him. The newspapers had moved on. But his name remained a cautionary whisper in boardrooms, a reminder that charisma without accountability is a crack waiting to spread. Letters arrived from lawyers offering appeals, from distant cousins asking for money, from nobody who mattered. Darius read them in silence, the walls closing tighter each day. One afternoon, Amara visited the prison, not for reconciliation, but for closure. The guards led her into a visitation room. Darius entered in a tan uniform, his swagger dimmed but not gone. He sat across from her, eyes searching. "You came," he said, voice low. "I came," she replied, steady. He leaned forward. "You won, Amara. You destroyed me. Is that what you wanted?" Amara shook her head. "I never wanted to destroy you. I wanted to protect what mattered. You destroyed yourself." His jaw tightened. "I loved you, you know. Even if I didn't show it right. You could have stood by me. We could have fixed this together." Amara's gaze didn't waver. Love doesn't kick. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't silence. Whatever you felt, it wasn't love. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she stood. "I didn't come here for you. I came here to remind myself of what happens when silence is mistaken for permission. I won't forget." She turned and walked away. Darius watched her go, and for the first time, no words came. Months later, the lab hosted a community celebration. The air buzzed with life, children running in the yard, parents laughing, music spilling from speakers. Food stalls lined the street. Jollof rice, fried plantains, puff dusted in sugar. The whole neighborhood had come out, reclaiming the lab not just as a building, but as a beating heart. On the stage, Miss Reyna welcomed the crowd. "Tonight we celebrate resilience. Tonight we remind ourselves that the lab is not built by one man or one woman. It's built by all of us." Applause erupted. She gestured to Amara. "And tonight we thank the woman who refused to stay silent, the woman who reminded us that truth, though costly, is worth everything." The crowd rose in cheers. Children chanted her name. Adiz wept quietly in the front row, her hands clasped. Amara stepped up, microphone in hand. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "I don't stand here as a hero," she began. "I stand here as proof. Proof that silence lets harm grow, but truth, though painful, can heal. Proof that no person is bigger than a community. Proof that children deserve more than speeches. They deserve safety, light, and love. She looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors, friends, strangers bound by one promise. The lab belongs